I say? I'm not the perfect barista, but you know what? I am learning, and still I have to say there's nothing better than a homemade latte, because who doesn't love lattes? Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel, or welcome to my YouTube channel in the new year. My name is Joanna Diana and you are watching Yes Mama, my channel about motherhood, pregnancy, and my own personal journey into spirituality. First of all, Happy New Year to everybody. It is 2022 and that is a mouthful to say. However, though it is an exciting year, it is the age of the Aquarius still, and loads of things happening this year. I'm super stoked, and I hope that you guys are also. 2021 was preparing us for what 2022 has in store for us. So here's to that. Okay, so this video I was like not super sure that I wanted to do, because I'm really big into like whatever you talk about you kind of call into existence, and considering my current plans of how I want my birth to go, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to talk about my C-section experience. But I felt that because I realized that there is not a lot of information about what actually happens during the procedure. Like when I was pregnant with Noah and I was getting ready to, go give birth, like I was watching videos online about natural births. I was never really researching cesareans. And then, right before I found out that I had to have one, I tried to look online, but all I could find was obviously like vlogs or people's stories, but no one really walking you through step by step of what is meant to happen. So this is what that video is about. No one prepared me. Nobody told me nothing. I had no clue. I went into the whole thing completely blinded. And I think that the reason why I had a hard time accepting what had happened to me, or, understanding what my body was going through, was because I was completely unprepared. So this is that video. What really happens throughout a C-section, before, during, and after. So just to give a little bit of a pretext and a backstory, I ended up in a cesarean with my firstborn, Noah, when I was 41 weeks and 3 days, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 41 weeks and 3 days. He was post-term, as they would consider it here. I am living in Cyprus, so again, the rules that happen here in the medical system are probably different from where you're located, but that's kind of how it works here. Here, they wouldn't allow me to go like 10 or 12 days past my due date, something like that. I was quite far along. There was no signs of labor, no signs of him coming. So my care provider actually gave us two choices, because we did have to figure out a way to get the baby out, because I was quite overdue and I was having low amniotic fluid. Okay, the baby was not in distress because I was being monitored. Yeah, every 2 days I was going into the clinic and they were putting those little belly monitors on me and they were checking to see how he was doing, and he was fine, I was fine, but my amniotic fluid was like getting really low and my placenta was aging. So we knew that it was time for him to come, but he was just not showing any signs that he wanted to come. So we were given two choices, either to be induced or have a cesarean. And I was scared to have either one. An induction was not exactly the safest way for me at the time, for a couple of different reasons, but one of them was because of a pre-existing condition that I dealt with when I was younger, which I explained in my birth video. Basically, we chose, and when I say we, it was me and my partner Joel, that we chose to go for a cesarean. And when I say it was a planned cesarean, I mean we had like 24 hours to decide, because I knew that I was really late with him, and according to them, I wasn't progressing into any sign of labor, and I knew that by the end of that week, I would either have to be induced or give birth somehow else. But I didn't think about cesarean. I gave birth on a Saturday, so the whole conversation with the care provider happened on a Thursday, and she said to me, by Sunday you need to have this baby because your amniotic fluid is really low, your placenta is aging, and he could also pass his first meconium, which is not safe. It could risk an infection for both of you. I knew that one way or another by that Sunday the baby would come. I just didn't know how. Obviously I was hoping for a natural labor, but that was not the case. And so I remember going home Thursday night, I was crying, and then I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. And so we came to the conclusion that we were having a cesarean. I called her back and I told her that, and so she scheduled me in for Saturday morning. So technically, I didn't really have that much time to think about it because she gave us the two choices, even though I knew that the induction was quite risky. The induction was risky in the sense that there was a big chance of me ending up in an emergency C-section because of the pre-existing condition that I had. So it was kind of an easy decision, but not really at the same time. So I spent my whole pregnancy watching videos of natural labors, natural deliveries. I was watching a ton of vlogs and a ton of birth stories from different mamas that were, talking about their experiences, but never had I watched anything related to cesareans, nothing. And so I found myself on Friday night, so the night before my scheduled C-section, just trying to find stories. And I find that as humans, we take comfort in other people's similar struggles to ours. So I was trying to find inspiration and uplifting by watching other people's stories. I found some vlogs, I connected with some people, but no one really was able to explain exactly what happens, right? You see the vlog footage, you see the surgery, you see everything, but I wasn't aware of what exactly is happening during the whole procedure. And there are a lot of things happening. And when you go unprepared, it can be terrifying, especially if you don't like hospitals and you're one of those people that are kind of scared of these kind of environments and scared of doctors, and you've never really had any medical interventions, which is 100% me. So this video is for those kind of people. This video is for you. Someone's experience that really resonated with me because it was very similar to mine, that kind of walks you through the whole thing live into the OR, is Jana Kramer's C-section podcast that is available on Apple Podcasts. I'm gonna link it down below. It is the episode where she gives birth to her son and she takes her phone into the OR and she voice records the whole thing. And I did not know about this podcast until after I gave birth. And I remember listening to her podcast literally 1 or 2 weeks after I had given birth to Noah. And I felt like I was literally reliving my C-section experience. So yeah, Jana Kramer, she did an amazing job at really capturing that raw event of her life, and honestly, it's a lot to let somebody in on. So if you're interested, I will post it down below in the description box, and you can also listen to her podcast and really compare the two and get a understanding of what her experience was like as well. Okay, so with the scheduled, planned C-section, basically the first thing that happens is that your doctor or your nurse, care provider is either going to give you a call or talk to you in your last appointment prior to schedule your C-section. So they will tell you that, number one, you are not allowed to eat after midnight the night before. So your last meal will probably be the evening before the surgery. They will tell you to get to the hospital about 1.5 hours early, just because in most cases they want to do a little bit of a whole checkup for the mom and the baby. They will tell you that you will have to take a shower the night before and in the morning. You can consume liquids up to 2 hours until surgery. When I say liquids, I mean clear liquids. One more thing that I want to talk about and mention, which I didn't think about at the time because I was so huge when I was pregnant. I was 93 kilos right before I gave birth, and I was 64 when I started. So you can imagine how much weight I gained, almost 30 kg. And it was really difficult for me to shave a lot of the times. And a lot of the times I just didn't like I couldn't be bothered. Like obviously I would take care of my legs and stuff, but like my hoo-ha area, I didn't care about. And that was a mistake. My advice to you ladies is shave before your C-section, because it'll be a while until you can actually do it again, until you can shave again. Why? Because I'm not gonna sit here and like, you know, sugarcoat it. You're gonna have a hard time accepting your incision because the whole area is gonna be numb. It's going to feel really strange to you, very like not a part of you, if that makes sense. You're gonna have a little bit of a hard time, like, you know, really connecting to what happened. So shaving around that area can be very, not necessarily painful, but odd and like uncomfortable. So yeah, one thing that I regret not doing is definitely not shaving before surgery. Definitely do that. In certain cases, some care providers in some hospitals will shave you beforehand. That wasn't the case for me. No, I'm not saying that I was like, oh my God, you know, crazy hairy, but you know, it's pregnancy. So I wasn't grooming as often as I would when I wouldn't be pregnant because my belly was so freaking huge. And even though I would often ask Joel to help me like groom myself, that on its own would be awkward. The next thing is getting to the hospital, and my recommendation, as your care provider would also recommend, is get to the hospital on time and even earlier. Don't be late like I was, because I was past the time that I was supposed to be there. I was very late. When you're not on time, one thing that is bound to happen is that your anxiety will just skyrocket through the roof. I know that because I wasn't on time, my anxiety was so bad. I mean, I was already like terrified and nervous for the whole procedure and what was going to happen, and there were so many emotions and things running through my head. I mean, like I'm about to meet my baby. And because I got there late, you know, everyone was a little bit frantic and like moving really quick. I didn't really have time to like take it in. When I got to the hospital, I got checked in, but I didn't even have a chance to like go to triage. I got pulled into another delivery room where I was handed the gown. Two nurses came in. One of them had like, I don't know, a whole sheet that she was taking notes on. And then the other one was asking me questions like, where are my baby's towels and where's his outfit and you know, things like that. Because I had to take all these things out of my bag and provide them for them. Here I was changing really quickly, putting on the gown. Everything was like bam, bam, bam. Like it was just going so quickly. When I was asked to give Noah's newborn outfit, that's when it hit me, and I was like, oh my God, like we are actually doing this. Like we are about to do this, to meet our baby, to go into surgery. And that's when like panic and stuff started to rush over me, and I started to just like kind of hyperventilate and start crying. Obviously the nurses were really supportive, and they were like trying to get me to calm down and to breathe, and Joel also was telling me like, honey, it's okay, just breathe. But I think because everything was happening so quickly, I didn't really have the time to like take in what was happening, and I just broke down, which is not good. You have to stay calm and collected in situations like this because the anxiety just makes things worse. After you get changed, they give a pair of scrubs to the partner and a hairnet and mask and everything that he needs to wear in order for him to be able to go into the OR, or her, whoever your partner is. So they get changed and ready to go into the OR, and then you both pretty much head down to the OR with the nurses. Now, here's one thing that I didn't know, which is pretty standard. The partner is not allowed to go into the OR while they are prepping you for surgery. And that was the number one terrifying thing for me, because here I was expecting Joel to be present the whole time and be my like support system, my pillar, and we just get split up right as we're going to the OR. So keep in mind, I just had this like major shock right before as I was getting changed. My brain is already like fumbled with so many thoughts, and then we're walking down together, and then right as we get to the OR, we get split and he's told to wait outside. I just remember asking when he will be able to come in, and they were reassuring me that once I'm all prepped and lying down and they're ready to start, they will bring him in. The next step was me walking into the OR with the nurse, where I met my care provider, my OBGYN, Dr. Martha. She was standing there, the anesthesiologist was there, and the 2 nurses that I was being prepped with prior. And I believe when everything else was done, another person came who was the pediatrician. So I think in total there was like 4 or 5 people, if I remember correctly. I remember the first thought that struck me was, wow, this is so terrifying. Wow, this is so bright in here. It is so cold. And it was like cold in the sense of not like temperature wise, but it was a cold environment, if that makes any sense. Like everything in the OR is stainless steel, the lights shining off everywhere, making the room even colder. To their own defense, they had classical music playing in the background, which was like, at the beginning I thought it was kind of corny, and I'm like, oh, like that's such a lame effort, you know, like I don't think anything can really help me feel better about the whole situation. But let me tell you, the classical music they had playing in the background really helped during surgery. And there are moments when I hear these specific, like, is it Beethoven or Mozart? I don't even remember, but like there's moments where I would like play this music later on for Noah when he was a newborn to fall asleep. Like I had just found it on YouTube, and it would instantly take me back to that OR. It's insane how like music gets stored in the body, and like it just gets stored into like your memory, and it just shoots you back to like specific moments of your life. They sit me down on the operation table, and this is basically when the doctor starts to explain what is about to happen to me. As she's explaining, a couple of things happen. They put the IVs in one arm, and then they put the blood pressure cuff on the other arm, and then they clipped a pulse monitor on my finger. And then she started to explain what would happen and how they would administer the spinal, and then I would lay down, and she kind of like walked me through the whole thing. But what I found is that doctors will not tell you how your body's going to feel. Like, what is the reaction that your body's going to have? And in my opinion, I think that is the scariest part, because your body can have either an adverse reaction to the anesthesia or the medication they're administering you, or you can just, you know, have a freak out like I did because your body's going numb and it's completely strange and weird to you. So in their defense, I think there's a very good reason why doctors don't share this information with you, because A, it may not happen to everybody, so telling you these things might actually scare the patient. B, I think that if they do tell you these things, it might cause even more anxiety for the patient, thinking like, oh my god, this is what my body's going to go through and what I'm going to feel. Maybe it's better to go in blinded and not really know what was going to happen. In my case, it kind of hit me like a brick, and it terrified me more. That's why I'm here sharing this, because I think that it can help a lot of people feel better knowing what they might experience. Because when you're in that room, when you're in that situation, when you're sitting on that operating table and these things are happening to your body, one thing you just got to keep in mind, and keep reminding yourself, it's normal. It's normal. And that was the one thing that I kept hearing throughout the whole procedure, throughout the whole birth and the whole hospital stay that I was there. And every time something was odd, I was just being reminded that it's okay, it's safe, it's normal. So once they prep you, as you're sitting on the operating table and they put all that stuff on you, they will then basically come and administer the spinal. So when she was starting to explain to me how they're going to administer the spinal and how I need to sit, I just went blank. Like, fear just rushed over me, anxiety just came over me, and I felt like I was just having a panic attack, and I just went completely blank. Bless her, like my OBGYN, Dr. Martha, she was so supportive. She just came in front of me and she told me to grab her arms and just breathe and just trust that the anesthesiologist is doing his job. So basically when they give you the spinal, you just have to like hunch your back forward and keep very still. In my case, because I wasn't in labor and I wasn't experiencing any contractions, that was not hard at all. It didn't even really hurt. It was like just like a quick pinch. But you know, your brain always puts stories together, and I always anticipated the worst. So I was like so terrified for something that really was nothing. So yeah, the spinal really didn't hurt. It wasn't that big of a deal. Both my doctor and the anesthesiologist standing behind me doing his job, they were telling me to count backwards. And he was like, okay, in a couple seconds, you are going to start to lose the feeling in your lower half of the body. And I was like, oh, it can't be that fast, you know? But I remember the feeling, and God, it was so odd. The best way I can describe it, like visually to understand, it's like, think of a tree that's growing trunks into the ground, like super quick. So I felt like this warm liquid just like spread everywhere down my back. It was like it was the weirdest thing. I could feel it, like I could actually feel it, like, you know, dispersing throughout my body. So it was like this thing that was like taking over my body. And within no time imaginable, like I could not feel my lower half. And that is when I started to freak out, because I didn't anticipate that kind of feeling. I basically couldn't feel anything from like my ribs down. And what do you think happens when you can't feel anything from your ribs down? Like you can't feel yourself breathing. You can't feel your like diaphragm expanding and retracting when you're breathing. So the first reaction that I had when I went numb and they were like turning me on my back to lay me down on the operating table, which is kind of like a T because they put your arms out like this, was, oh my God, I cannot breathe. Like I'm not breathing. And so again, my anxiety came over and panic because I didn't understand what was happening to my body. I thought I was dying. But of course, because I had, you know, the blood pressure cuff on me and the heart monitor clip on my finger, and, you know, they were watching my vitals and stuff like that, everything was fine. It was just, I couldn't feel myself breathing. And that was very odd. Almost like an out-of-body experience. Like, I just can't even describe it, because like, from here on up, you're totally fine, and then from here on down, you can't feel anything. This was like the one thing that I wish somebody would have shared with me. So here's the reason why they tell you not to consume any food before your C-section, like like after midnight. A lot of people can actually end up having nausea and actually throwing up from everything that's going on, from the anesthesia, from the different drugs that they're administering you. So I got so sick. I remember after they laid me down, and you know, the anesthesia kicked in, I couldn't feel my body anymore, and I was on my back, and I had that little bit of a fit where I felt like I couldn't breathe. I started feeling sick right away. I felt like I was going in and out, like in and out, in and out. Like I was like closing my eyes and telling them like I can't stay awake. Like it was just so scary for me, and I think my body was just having a little bit of a shocked reaction to whatever was being given to me, because everything was completely strange to my body. Again, I remember the anesthesiologist saying to me like, it's completely normal, hang in with us. I'm going to give you something through your IV that within an instant you're going to feel better. And I kid you not, like I don't know what he gave me through that IV. That just goes to show how powerful hospital drugs are. Oh my God. I don't know what he gave me, but within seconds, I was just like back. Like I was back, and I was like energetic, like, you know, I was uplifted, and I was like excited, and I was like, let's do this. So once you're prepped and you are laying down and the anesthesia has kicked in and you're pretty much ready to go, they will bring in your partner. He or she will stand like right by your head on a little stool. I believe that from where they're sitting, they can pretty much see a lot more than they want to see. I'll just be totally honest about that. There is a drape that goes up. In some instances, that drape may be either clear, or like it was in my case, it was not clear. It was a blue one. The next step before they actually start surgery is doing a feeling test. And there's a couple different ways they may do that depending where you're from or where you're located or your different care provider and hospital. But for me, the way they did it was through like clamping my skin and seeing if I could feel it. Another way that they may do it is by using an ice cube and running it across your belly, like in a transverse direction. And basically, if you feel the cold, that means your pain sensors are still receiving. And if you don't feel the cold and you just feel pressure, then that means you're pretty much good to go. I am like notorious for reading the worst horrible stories online and like the worst case scenario. And I had read stories of particular cases where the anesthesia didn't actually kick in for particular women. So they actually felt everything, and I was terrified of that ever happening to me. And so when they were doing the feeling test on me and she was clamping my skin, there was a point where I actually didn't even believe her, and I was like, no, you're not actually doing it. Obviously I couldn't see anything because there was a drape separating us, and you know, like I couldn't see her. But Joel was sitting on my right side, and he was like constantly reassuring me that no, like babe, like they're clamping, like if you can't feel that, you're good. The surgery itself goes on pretty quickly. Like, it was actually mind-boggling how fast it was and how insanely quick the whole procedure really takes. I mean, the baby was out within like minutes. The one thing that I do want to mention is that you have to keep in mind, even with a cesarean birth, like because you are not pushing out the baby still needs to be pushed. So you will feel pressure and you will feel tugging, but you will not feel pain, or you shouldn't feel any pain. In my case, like I remember the whole table was like shaking, and that was again a very weird thing for me to feel because you can't feel half your body, just your upper half, and you know, there's like 3 people tugging at you. And like, I remember that even, I think it was the anesthesiologist or the nurse. No, it was the nurse. It was one of the nurses, because the anesthesiologist was taking videos of the whole procedure. It was one of the nurses. She was like pulling from the top, like not pulling, she was pushing from the top on my abdomen for Noah to slide out, and the care provider, Dr. Martha, she was pulling him out. And keep in mind, the incision is like so tiny. I believe it's 10 centimeters long. That would make sense. Like, if your vagina dilates to 10 centimeters, why would your incision be any bigger? Like, the baby's got to come out through that kind of a hole. He was a little bit tough to bring out because he was 4 kilos and 380 grams, so quite big. So I remember they were like tugging and tugging and tugging at me, and eventually they like pulled him out and they brought him over the drape. The drape came down a little bit and I was able to like touch him and see him. It's really just so beautiful from then on. Just like with a natural birth, you kind of just forget about everything else. You forget about the pain, you forget about the fears. As soon as you see your child, just everything becomes so zen. We had our, you know, moment, and then they took him away right away with the pediatrician, and I remember Jolt went with them, like he was present with Noah the whole time. After Jolt left, you know, after the adrenaline kind of came down from like the whole initial seeing my baby for the first time thing, I felt like myself dropping again and like kind of going in and out of it. So I think, I don't know, maybe it was the anesthesia like wearing off or whatever, but I remember they gave me a little bit more medication, and then they just, from then on, they just talk to you and they just sew you up. The music in the background was continuing. Then the next thing that I remember happening is Jolt came back in right as they were finishing sewing me up. He came back in with Noah, and he was holding him, and right away, like, him and the nurse wanted to place him on my chest and in my arms. And even though I was like so excited to receive him, because I was so out of it, and so I felt like my body just getting more and more numb, I was like, I don't know, they like plumped him on my chest, and it was just such a heavy weight. I remember like getting this like big thing on me, and I was scared that I wouldn't hold him. So I held him there for a couple of minutes. It was a bit of a shock, gave him a couple kisses, and then I was like, just take him please, because I can't keep him. Like, I felt like, you know, I was gonna drop him or something. So after you meet with the baby, still in the OR, what happens is that whatever case you may be in, they either take the baby to the NICU or they may take the baby to the maternity, whatever the case may be. In my case, they took Noah to the maternity, and Jolt assisted the whole time. He went with the nurses. And everything for me, in my case, kind of became a blur from here on out. Like, I just remember them saying, okay, we're done. And then just me in and out again. Like, I was just passing in and out again. And there was like a bunch of people, like other nurses, that came to help scoot me off the operating table and onto a gurney so that I could be wheeled into the elevator and up to left the floor where the recovery room was. Having all these people lift you up because you're literally dead weight is so weird. So I just remember my body just feeling so heavy and just a bunch of people in commotion around me just lifting me up, scooping me and just like plopping me on the, okay, not plopping, like they were very gentle, like putting me on the gurney. And then the last thing I remember is being wheeled into the elevator, and that's it. Just from there on, it just goes blank. Okay, so the couple hours after the C-section are also very strange to our bodies because our bodies are wearing off the anesthesia. So we're going to slowly start feeling our legs again and wiggling our toes. You have the first few hours where like the baby's wheeled in and you're doing the whole like skin to skin and the breastfeeding and you know, you're getting to see your baby, but then like you start to regain movement and feeling in your lower half. Then you realize that you need to be changed. I had nurses coming in periodically who would change our maternity pad, and I had a huge shock with that because I didn't realize how much you actually bleed after birth. It is not like a period leak. It's quite a bit. And for some reason I thought because I didn't have a natural birth it wouldn't be as bad, but like actually it's just the same because your body needs to clean itself out. I remember the nurse coming in, they take your things off, they lift you up, they change your diaper. Yeah, I guess I was wearing a maternity diaper and it's quite odd and you feel a bit helpless and it can be a bit embarrassing, but you know, they deal with this every day, so really there is no judgment there. Eventually, once you actually have full feeling of your body, they take out your catheter, which can be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's nothing crazy. Once your catheter is out and you know, quite a lot of hours have passed by, they will encourage you to like move your body in any way that is comfortable for you. So for me, they brought me to the side of the bed and they told me to take my time. You are encouraged to go to the bathroom and pass your first urine on your own. It is protocol that the nurse has to be there to make sure that this happens. And also another thing that they really need to ensure that you do after, you know, abdominal surgery is that you pass gas. That can also be a little bit awkward and weird, you know, to do in front of a nurse, but you know, it's just something you have to do. I remember that, you know, they had waited until I was able to pee on my own for the first time and be able to pass my gas on my own for the first time, and that was like such a big triumph for everybody because that meant that everything was fine and everything was subtly fine and my body was recovering properly. Okay, 2 things that no one will probably tell you about C-sections and anesthesia is, number 1, from anesthesia, whether it's epidural or spinal, your skin might get really itchy. And when I say itchy, I mean really freaking itchy. And I didn't know why that was. And obviously it's because your pain receptors and your feeling receptors are just all coming back and they're starting to gain feeling again. But I literally felt like I wanted to scratch my skin off. Like it was insanely itchy. If you feel that after the anesthesia, it's completely normal, but it can be really, really annoying. And the second thing is that I felt like a weird pain like under my ribs when I was breathing, and that's because I had air trapped inside. And I mean, I didn't know. When I was like laying down, I would feel it when I'm breathing, but when I was standing or sitting up, I couldn't feel it. So I had asked the nurses like what this pain was, and again, I was being assured that it was normal. And what I was told is that sometimes when you have an operation like a C-section, air gets trapped inside and it just needs time to escape. And I was like, oh, great. It was hard to move to begin with, and it hurt from the incision, and it was like hard to turn and stuff, and so it was really difficult for me to find a comfortable position where I wasn't feeling this pain. I would say this pain probably lasted like 2.5 days. Like by the time we were like really home and integrating into our new life with Noah, like it was pretty much subsided, like gone. But in the first 2 days in the hospital, it was pretty like intense. Like I could not sleep laying down. Like I had to put the bed in like a sitting position because I needed to clear out that air from inside whatever the heck it was being stored. The aftercare of a C-section may be different for like a lot of people. What I find is that the care providers actually don't really teach us about proper aftercare for a C-section. I was just told to just leave it, and I had like 2 little stitches on each end of my incision, and I knew that I had to come back to the hospital after 7 days to get those taken out. We were told to shower normally, but obviously like not using an excessive amount of body wash or soap that could really, you know, make the area dry or irritated. You're just encouraged to kind of go back to your normal life and your routine. Being really careful of what you lift up, how much effort you put into moving. You have to move within your comfort zone. You are not allowed to lift really heavy things. Sometimes even lifting the baby in a certain position can be really painful, but you are encouraged to move. What I realized through this experience is that we use our abdominal muscles for absolutely everything that we do in our everyday life. Whether it's laughing, whether it's sneezing, whether it's pushing poop out in the bathroom. We use these muscles for absolutely everything, and like obviously we all take them for granted because, you know, if you've never had surgery, you wouldn't know that or even think about that. Even just like going over speed bumps with the car, like I would have to just kind of like hold my tummy and brace myself for like the speed bumps, you know, because I just had to like breathe in and breathe out because it was quite painful. What I recommend doing that worked for me is after the first week and a half, once your incision has settled a little bit and it's not as swollen, you can start using like a brace. A brace really helped me. Like I think I started using a brace like 10 or 14 days after surgery, and a brace really helped me. It was just like a waist trainer kind of. It really helped to like keep everything intact, especially when I was out somewhere. Having a brace really helps. It helps with your standing, it helps with your walking, it helps with your laughing, with any movement that you do that is affecting that little area. The most uncomfortable thing right after surgery was obviously going to the toilet, and that was something again that I did not anticipate or think about, because when you're having a natural birth, you're kind of expecting that like that whole area down there is going to be sore. Everyone's telling you that your first go to the toilet is going to be really hard and difficult and awkward and painful. And in my head, I was like, oh, well, I didn't give birth vaginally, so why would I have any pain down there? Well, I didn't, but going to the toilet and doing anything involves your abdominal muscles, so it was still really painful, and it was an adjustment. Like you have to learn how to do it all over again. And what worked for me is that I would like hold my stomach and just like do my business and push it out. It was still uncomfortable and painful, but you know, applying a little bit of pressure on that tender area really, really helps. I think the number one thing that is not being talked about enough is how disconnected from our bodies we feel after a C-section as women, and like how difficult it is to even come to terms with our scar. First of all, because that whole area is tender and numb for a really long time. Like you may not gain feeling back within that area up to a year after your surgery. Some care providers will tell you this, and then again, some won't. So this may come to you as a very, very odd thing again, and something very difficult to accept or come to terms with. Imagine like you're constantly feeling your tummy, but you can't feel your hand or your fingers touching that area. And so of course it feels distant and strange to you, right? For me, it was even difficult to look at my scar. In the beginning, when I did start to use a cream to take care of the scar tissue, I couldn't even do it myself. Like I had to always ask Joel to apply it for me, just because I was kind of, and this sounds really bad, but I was like kind of grossed out by my scar because I had a hard time connecting and then like to this whole story and accepting what happened. You know, obviously everybody's different, but that was my experience with it. And the more women I talk to who have had C-sections, the more I realize that this is something quite common, and I'm not the only one who's felt like this. So if you do feel that, just know that it's quite normal and quite usual, and it does clear up over time. One thing that I also didn't think about prior to this is that, you know, your scar is going to be swollen for a while, and it might make you feel not your best and not your you know, sexiest or prettiest. And I had a hard time accepting that as well, because like I felt like I had like rolls because of my scar, you know, like my stomach was always going on top of it. Obviously now, because it's been so long, and okay, now I'm pregnant, so I have like a big bump anyways, like I'm 30 weeks pregnant. But once the scar was no longer swollen and I started to gain feeling back, this was like months after, and that area became flat again, like I wasn't getting that like overhanging skin. But whenever I would be bloated from period or whatever, maybe just eating, again, I would have this thing where like, I don't know if it makes sense, but like the scar skin kind of pleated. Yeah, and it just wasn't pretty. So I don't know, it's different for everybody. I was very fortunate, and I am very fortunate, even with my second pregnancy, that I have no stretch marks, and I have really good scar tissue, and everything healed completely fine. I pretty much have all my feeling back in that area, and this is a really common question that I get a lot of the times is, do you feel pain in that area with your second pregnancy? The answer is no. I feel no pain. Everything for me like healed properly. And I'm just very thankful that I had a really great team and a really amazing care provider who really took care to make it pretty and, you know, like be really careful with it and give me what I wanted. The most commonly asked question from people around me and family and stuff like that is, am I going to have a second C-section, a repeat C-section? And my answer to that is, I don't know what I'm going to have. What I do know is going into the next labor and delivery is I'm not going to have the amount of expectations that I had with my first. Obviously, mentally, I am preparing for a VBAC. I was so adamant on having a natural birth with Noah. I do want to try, and this is something that I had discussed with my care provider from the very beginning of my pregnancy, and I am a great candidate for a VBAC. Now, if you don't know what a VBAC is, VBAC stands for vaginal birth after cesarean, but in order to have a VBAC, you need to have a TOLAC, which is a trial of labor after cesarean, which obviously, if it's successful, it would end up in a successful VBAC. There's a couple factors during this pregnancy that I had to take into consideration in order to even be a good candidate for a VBAC, which was keeping my weight down and not gaining as much weight as I did with my first pregnancy. So making sure that the baby's weight is relatively like average or lower than Noah's, because Noah was a very big baby. And another thing was keeping my blood sugar down. So I actually did the insulin diabetes test twice instead of just once, which you normally do it, I believe, at 20 weeks or 20 something weeks. So I did it once at 16 weeks and then again at like 20 weeks or 21 weeks. And my results both times came back completely fine. I am not a high-risk pregnancy. I have been completely fine. I thank God and the universe for giving me a healthy pregnancy, a healthy baby, and no complications so far. Knock on wood, and thank you to the Lord. So I am obviously really, really open and hoping for a natural delivery. When I say natural, I mean like a vaginal delivery. One thing to keep in mind is that a lot of care providers, once you have had a C-section, they will not induce you. And that is something very common amongst care providers, that induction is not recommended for a VBAC. And again, that depends. Some may do it, but a lot of them don't. So basically the only way that I would be able to go ahead and even have a trial of labor is if my body would naturally go into labor. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning into this video. Thank you for watching it to the end. If you did, I hope it was helpful. I hope it was informative. And I hope I didn't terrify you about the whole thing, because I just kept sharing how terrified I was. But I was just solely sharing my experience, and I'm gonna keep stressing that it was solely my experience. But anyways, thank you for tuning in. Please give this video a big thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe down below if you like my content, and if you want to see more videos from me. Comment below what kind of videos you want to see. It always helps me spark up new ideas. So without further ado, I'm going to sign off now. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care, lovelies.